Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are getting on to another edition of the early offseason preview, asking a handful of questions of each of the teams in the league as they prepare here for really the main stretch of potential trade season and free agency. So we are looking at some of the issues for each of the teams prior to that period. And today, well, we're talking about a team that has a lot of stuff to think about, a lot of stuff to talk about, and that is the Washington Wizards, or I don't know, the team formerly known as the Washington Wizards at this point, because they have gone over a lot of changes just in the last week or so. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. For now, let's start things off relatively simply. We're going to take a look at the stats for the team in terms of their overall record in the regular season. They go 35-47, good enough for 12th in the Eastern Conference, 3rd in the Southeast Conference, outside of the top teams Southeast Division, not conference, but outside of the top couple of teams there, that division was not great overall. So they finished 12th in the East. They do not make the play-in. They see zero postseason action. So we're just going to get straight into some of the other statistics for them. And obviously, for a team that misses the playoffs entirely, these stats aren't going to be great. 22nd in the league in offensive rating, 21st in the league in defensive rating. That puts their net rating at 23rd in the league, actually. Not 100% sure how that math works out, but in the lower third across the board here, they did play with the 17th highest pace, so they're at least slightly higher on that front. And they did have the 13th highest payroll in the league in the last campaign. Of course, with the massive overhaul that this roster sort of underwent, all of those numbers are probably not crazy relevant because the vast majority of the players involved in getting those numbers are no longer here, but those were still their stats for the previous campaign. And now we get into the interesting part, the additions and losses for this lineup. It is a very, very long list. In terms of the players added here for the Washington Wizards at this point, they get Landry Shamet via trade. They also get Tyus Jones via trade. Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari, Jordan Poole, and Ryan Rollins all come to Washington via trades. Obviously, not all the same trade, right? Some of them come from the Porzingis trade, some from the Beal trade, some from the Chris Paul trade. So one way or another, those players make their way to the Wizards lineup via trade. In terms of the draft, the Wizards were able to grab a couple of guys as well. They get Bilal Coulibaly. Still not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but they do grab him with their first round pick. They also get Tristan Vukcevic. I hope that's right as well. I'm really bad with these names, but they also acquire him via the draft. So a whole slew of players coming in through various means, but they're all now a part of the Wizards lineup. In terms of players that have left the Wizards, obviously we've got the big ones. Kristaps Porzingis and Bradley Beal were both traded away. Jordan Goodwin and Isaiah Todd, a couple of young players who were involved in those maneuvers, were outgoing as well. And Kyle Kuzma, at least for now, is going to be listed among the losses. He declined his player option and entered free agency. As we have mentioned with several of these guys who have declined their player options, there is still a chance that the Wizards re-sign him. But for now, he was a member of the roster who now no longer is. So we're going to count him in the losses column. So that does it for the Wizards. A whole lot of changes for this team. They're going to look unbelievably different in a lot of areas for the 23-24 campaign. And that leads us right into one of our sort of big questions here. That first question is this a redemption season for Jordan Poole? So Jordan Poole's time with the Warriors came to a rather abrupt end The guard now finds himself on a Wizards roster with starkly different aspirations and, more importantly, expectations compared to his previous situation with Golden State. If you want to be cynical, if you want to be negative, and let's entertain that for just a little bit here, the Warriors decided essentially that Poole wasn't worth the trouble or the money that they had committed to him anymore, and they ship him off to figuratively speaking, the other side of the NBA world. They send him not only to a different conference, but to a team that isn't really looked at as being capable of doing anything in the near future. That's the negative. If you're looking at this from a potentially positive outlook, though, Jordan Poole now has the chance to rehabilitate his image on a Wizards team with significantly less pressure, right? And when I say rehabilitate, I mean both his image and his statistics. His numbers did decline, and frankly, he looked a little bit lost at times in that last playoff run with the Warriors. Part of the reason, perhaps, why they decided to pull the plug on having him on the roster. But now Poole has a chance to potentially step into a position as the number one option on a young Wizards team that just lost its three leading scorers, right? Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, and Kyle Kuzma were their three leading scorers, and all three of them are gone. Two of them for sure aren't coming back, and Kyle Kuzma is incredibly unlikely to be coming back. So it's not an ideal situation. You go from being a valued piece on a potential championship contender to being out in the NBA equivalent of the middle of nowhere right now with a Wizards squad that's trying to rebuild. But Poole has potentially been given a second chance here. He has the chance to prove if he can be the guy for this team, get his numbers back up, go out there and try to prove that the Warriors gave up on him too early. And I think he should do everything in his power to make the most of it, especially since the Wizards truly don't have a guy who's going to step into that position as of yet. It feels wide open for Poole to be the number one option on the offensive end. So he's got an opportunity. I say, why not make the most of it? But that does kind of segue a little bit into point number two here. I mentioned there is no sort of clear-cut number one outside of Poole right now, which brings me to the point for the Wizards. Point number two, it is time to develop the young talent and the young players. You've got guys like Corey Kispert, Denny Avdia, Daniel Gafford, etc., who are all still young and will continue to develop one way or the other. So you can play them, as much or as little as you want and see where the development goes from there. It is worth noting, though, if you're the Wizards, you do have a little bit of money now with three of your main players gone. So if they do want to avoid a full-on tank job and maybe bring in some veteran experience to help along with the development of some of their young players, give them some guys who kind of know what they're doing and can maybe serve in that mentor role, there are some cheap options on the market. In terms of guards, we're still looking at guys like your Jordan Clarksons, kind of a guard forward, but like Kelly Oubre Jr., Austin Reeves type guys who are not going to be dirt cheap, but probably won't command more than like that 20-ish million kind of range, ballparking it. Of course, since they now have Jordan Poole in the lineup, maybe they don't really feel the need to go looking for more help or depth at the guard position. But that brings us to the situation on the interior in terms of their big men. If they're looking for someone to bring in to replace or fill the hole that Porzingis left, then there's options there as well. They could try to get in on whatever's going on with the bidding war for Brook Lopez. Some noise about maybe Jakob Hurtl being available, or even someone like Christian Wood, right? These guys, they wouldn't be cheap, right? You would have to shell out a little bit of money for them. But I'm pretty damn sure any of those three options are going to cost you less than the $36 million that you were going to pay Porzingis if you hadn't traded him. So you'll still be saving something in the long run, and you'll get a more experienced player for your younger guys to play around, to focus around. We talked about this a little bit back in the video that I put out talking about the Beal and Porzingis trades, it's not always a good thing to just let all of your young players sort of go wild and figure it out themselves. Sometimes they do, sometimes it works, and a natural hierarchy develops. Other times it just turns into chaos, and that chaos kind of forces the players to cannibalize their own development, because instead of all developing as a team, they're kind of fighting against each other for playing time. And that kind of competition is going to happen no matter what, but you would hope that it would be in a more friendly environment, that it's competition, not straight up infighting for that time. So the Wizards need to develop their young talent. I think there's a lot of potential there. They could just stand pat and let them try to figure it out by themselves. They could also bring in, again, a mid-level experienced name to try and give them some sort of tent pole to work the rest of these young guys around, just give them a little bit more structure. But well, talk about the young players a little bit. I want to key in on one of those players in particular as we get to point number 3, and that point is expect to see more from and more of Daniel Gafford. With Porzingis gone, Daniel Gafford is someone that the Wizards seem to have at least some faith in moving forward. Now, his numbers aren't fantastic. Last season, he averaged 9 points per game and 5.6 rebounds per game, but he also played just under 21 minutes per game last season. So, yeah, those numbers aren't great, but they're pretty good considering the limited time that he played. Also, very importantly, in his 2 full seasons in Washington so far, he's missed just 14 games. So he has been available for the team over the course of his time there. And his consistency, even if the numbers aren't as high as you would like them to be, that consistency earned him enough for a relatively modest extension. They gave him 3 more years. He's set to make $12.4 million next season. So he is a cheap option that they have locked down for multiple seasons. And now that guys like Porzingis are gone, now that Beal and Kuzma are gone, I think he's going to get more opportunities to shine and more opportunities to pump up his own numbers here. The points per game and rebounds per game really should increase with all of those big names no longer on the roster. And what's also important to consider here for the Wizards and for Gafford is that Washington, whether they sort of meant to do it or not, basically cleared the depth chart for Gafford, right? Obviously, Porzingis is gone. That's your starting center / power forward out of the picture. The team also traded Rui Hachimura to the Lakers last season. Isaiah Todd was moved as part of I think it's the Beal trade, not the Porzingis trade, but either way, Isaiah Todd is now gone, which means the only other centers on the lineup right now or from last season for the Wizards are Taj Gibson, who is 37 years old, and Jay Huff, who played the last season on a 2-way contract and only actually played 7 games in total. It's also worth noting, both of those guys, Gibson and Huff, are both free agents right now. Neither one of them is actually signed for this season. So if you look at the center position for the Wizards, as of right now, it's basically Gafford or nothing. Now, someone's going to have to get picked up, because even if you are going to put Gafford into the position as your full-time center, he cannot play 48 minutes a night. So you do need to grab someone there. But unless they go out and get one of those guys I was mentioning before, right, like Pirtle or Lopez or Christian Wood, Gafford is going to get the vast majority of the time at that center position. So that's really going to throw him into the deep end here. We're going to see whether or not he's ready to take on that role in a sort of trial by fire, effectively. But if you're the Wizards, you don't have a whole lot to lose. If he doesn't produce much more than he was in 21 minutes playing behind Porzingis, you're not really projected to do a whole lot anyway. Don't think this Wizards team is really looking at a sort of run for a playoff spot. So you can afford to have a season where you just kind of see if your young guys can get better. And Gafford is included in that group. So that is it for the Wizards. You kind of saw this coming a little bit, right? You don't trade away that many big pieces and let Kyle Kuzma just kind of walk. and still expect to be a contender. They are sort of entering rebuilding mode, but at least they have some assets now to work with. So that'll do it for the Wizards. Let me know what you think. Is this the bounce back season for Jordan Poole? Does he come out and get 20 to 25 points a game and sort of have his little mini revenge tour here? Do you think the young players are going to be able to develop? Do you think that they have any sort of diamond in the rough in that sort of group of, Avdia, Kispert, Gafford, etc.? And frankly, what do you think the Wizards do here? How many wins are we projecting, right? Are they going to be at the bottom? Are they looking at getting into the lottery, or could they maybe surprise us a little bit? But either way, feel free to share your thoughts with me. But for now, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.